I'm sure it will come as no surprise that I'm making a Movies That Changed My Life video about a David Lynch film, but I feel like it might come as a surprise that the David Lynch film I picked is The Elephant Man. It even came as a surprise to me. I contemplated making one of these videos about Fire Walk with Me or Mulholland Drive, and at no point in time was I considering The Elephant Man, but then I saw the movie again, this time in a theater, and it just felt right. The Elephant Man is the first David Lynch film I ever saw. I didn't even know who David Lynch was at the time. I was in a typing class in 6th grade, and for the final days of the class, the teacher decided to show us this movie for no reason other than the fact that it was just her favorite movie. At the time, I thought it was a weird choice to show this movie to a group of middle schoolers. It feels like the type of movie that kids wouldn't appreciate, or the type of movie kids wouldn't be able to focus on long enough to fully absorb its message. But in hindsight, I think children are the ones who can benefit from this film's message the most, because children, especially teenagers, can be relentlessly cruel. I remember when I was a kid, if someone was mean to me, I'd always get told they're just jealous. Honestly, I think people still sometimes say that to me now as an adult, and I understand the sentiment, but I think it's such a harmful message for kids. I think kids need to understand that not everyone is going to like you, and not everyone is going to be nice to you, but it isn't always going to be because they're jealous of you. And The Elephant Man is one of the best examples of that, as well as a few other valuable life lessons. So, spoiler warning for David Lynch's 1980 film, The Elephant Man. Although, if you've heard of Joseph Merrick, then you probably already know what happens in this movie, because the film is loosely based on his life, but in the movie the character's name is John Merrick. But for those who aren't familiar with Joseph Merrick's story, he was a man who lived in London during the late 19th century. Due to his physical appearance, Merrick was given the stage name The Elephant Man and was exhibited at a freak show. In the film, Merrick is played by John Hurt, and Anthony Hopkins plays Surgeon Frederick Treves. Treves sees Merrick at the freak show, where the ringmaster, Mr. Bites, played by Freddie Jones, treats Merrick horribly. Treves pays Mr. Bites to send Merrick to the London hospital to be examined. When Merrick returns home, Mr. Bites beats him. Treves brings him back to the hospital, and at first the nurses are afraid of him, and the hospital has a policy against housing people who are deemed incurable. So there are a lot of obstacles that Treves has to go through to help Merrick. Mr. Bites claimed Merrick had a mental disability because he never spoke, but Treves encourages him to speak and discovers that's not the case. Treves teaches him a few basic conversational sentences so he can prove that he's capable of maybe not being cured but making progress, so the hospital will allow him to stay. But of course, when the time comes to demonstrate his ability to speak in front of the hospital's governor, it comes across as very rehearsed, so he isn't convinced. And as he walks away, Merrick starts reciting the 23rd Psalm, which surprises Treves because he never taught him the whole thing. He only taught him a portion of it. This scene made me cry, just the way Treves goes from feeling defeated because he wasn't able to convince the hospital to allow Merrick to stay, to that moment of realization when he hears Merrick on the other side of the door speaking words he never taught him to speak, and the music kicks in and there's just this moment of hope. But what really moved me about this scene was how Merrick waits until the door is closed to recite the psalm. It just made me feel like this is a man who knows he's capable of more than what people expect from him, but he spent so much of his life being told what to do and being mistreated, so he waits until they leave the room, both out of fear and because he doesn't feel the need to prove anyone wrong. He's reciting it for himself. When Treves asks how he knew the rest of the psalm, Merrick explains that he knows how to read and he knows the 23rd Psalm really well because it's his favorite. What I took away from this scene is that people will thrive in environments where they are allowed to grow, where people support them and encourage them and believe in them, because Mr. Bites just assumed Merrick was mute and had an intellectual disability because he never took the time to get to know Merrick as a human being. He treated him like an animal and acts like all he's good for is being put on display. And Merrick ends up being this really talented artist. He builds a model of a cathedral based on what he can see from his hospital window, and he only has a partial view of the cathedral, so he uses his imagination to figure out the rest. And you can just tell this is someone who would have been afraid to express himself artistically in his previous environment, but now he's being treated like a person and can actually express himself and do things that bring him joy. Another scene that made me cry was when Treves introduces Merrick to his wife Anne, played by Hannah Gordon. Merrick starts crying when Anne tells him she's very pleased to meet him and tries to shake his hand, and he explains he's not used to being treated so well by a beautiful woman. I don't don't really have much in common with any of the characters in this film, but I understand the feeling of trying to fight back tears when someone shows you a level of kindness you're not used to receiving, but you have to try and hold back the tears because the kind gesture is something so common that it seems ridiculous to cry over it. And I'm pretty sure that's a feeling that doesn't ever really go away. I experience that whenever I'm upset and someone asks me what's wrong or if I'm okay, because I'm just not used to that. I'm used to being told not to cry or not to be upset. So when someone asks me what's wrong or if I'm okay, I struggle to get the words out because I'm trying not to start sobbing, but it's like a reflex that I can't control. I know John Hurt was wearing a lot of prosthetics for this role, but his performance in this moment is incredible. Just the way he uses his voice, and you can tell he's trying not to cry but can't help it. It just feels so authentic and captures the feeling I was just talking about perfectly. And in the same scene, Merrick sees the family photos on the mantle and asks to see them. And then he asks if they'd like to see a photo of his mother. And he expresses his concern that he must have been a great disappointment to her. Anne tells him no son as loving could ever be a disappointment. And he says, if she could see me with such lovely friends, perhaps she could love me as I am. I've tried so hard to be good. When he says that, Anne breaks down in tears. I felt that so deeply because this man just wants to make his mother proud, and something as simple as having tea with a couple of friends is so substantial for him, but it's something so many people take for granted. I've never been the best at making friends, and there have been plenty of moments in my life where I genuinely felt like I had no friends. And anytime I'm in a situation where it feels like I have no one and a group of people are welcoming to me and invite me to hang out with them, I get that same sort of feeling. At one point, famous actress Madge Kendall visits Merrick at the hospital, and at first I was a little hesitant about this scene. I thought maybe she had some sort of selfish or ulterior motive, but she seemed so genuine in her interaction with Merrick that it really moved me. But as Merrick gets more and more guests visiting him, Treves questions if his treatment of Merrick is morally right or if he's making a spectacle of him the same way Mr. Bites did. I think this is such an important moment because I personally didn't love the way Treves treated Merrick at first. Obviously, he was much nicer than Mr. Bites, but he still seemed to get annoyed with Merrick when he was trying to get him to speak, and he puts him on display for his colleagues. I just think it's so important that people reflect on what's driving their actions. I feel like there's always an inherent bit of selfishness that drives people to do things, and the fact that Treves questions if what he's doing is right is what proves to me his heart is in the right place. And at this point, it feels like what he cares about most is making sure Merrick is able to enjoy his life. While all this is happening, there's a night porter at the hospital who starts selling tickets to people to come at night to see the Elephant Man. These people laugh and gawk at him, and it's just really upsetting to watch. During one of those nights, Mr. Bites shows up and he kidnaps Merrick. So he puts Merrick back on display at his freak show. But when Merrick starts to feel weak and collapses on stage during a show, Bites locks him in a cage, and it's one of the most devastatingly dehumanizing things I've ever seen. But the other performers help Merrick escape. On his way back home, Merrick gets harassed by some young boys at a train station, and when he tries to run away from them, he accidentally knocks down a young girl. This leads to an angry mob chasing after him, and in what's probably the most well-known scene from this film, this angry mob corners him and he cries out, "I am not an animal, I am a human being, I am a man." And it's heartbreaking, but also kind of cathartic, because he's probably been wanting to shout that for so long because there's only so much dehumanization a person can take. Eventually, the police bring him back to the hospital and Treves apologizes to him. And what's probably my favorite line from the film, Merrick tells Treves he's happy every hour of the day and his life is full because he knows he is loved. And the fact that he can say that is all thanks to Treves. Then they go to the theater to see a production that Madge Kendall is in. And in another moment that made me cry, she dedicates the performance to him. That night, Merrick completes his model of the cathedral and he goes to bed and decides to remove the pillows and try to sleep on his back, imitating a photo that he keeps looking at throughout the film. But it's established earlier that if he tries to sleep lying down, he'll die because the size of his head would cause him to asphyxiate. And Lynch depicts this in a way that's so non-judgmental. He just wanted to sleep in a way that was considered normal. I don't know how David Lynch pulled this off, but every single one of his films gets better with every rewatch. I've never rewatched a Lynch film and thought to myself, wow, that was worse than I remembered. Every single time I walk away saying, wow, that was even better than I remembered. And all of his films feel so timeless. Since The Elephant Man depicts a lot of ableism, I feel like it's such a tricky topic and the movie could have aged very poorly, but The Elephant Man didn't age poorly at all. I think The Elephant Man is often one of the films that gets considered an outlier in David Lynch's filmography, because like The Straight Story, it's a simple, straightforward narrative without the surreal elements and traditional Lynchisms. There's a hint of surrealism in the scenes that bookend the film with Merrick's mother, but other than that, it's a very straightforward story and one of Lynch's most accessible films. Despite being one of Lynch's most normal films, I feel like in a way, The Elephant Man is the best representation of David Lynch's art in general, because it shows how people are often frightened by what they don't understand. And some people will dismiss Lynch's films as being too weird, or get frustrated and say his films don't make any sense. But his work has and continues to be so rewarding for the people who took the time to become better acquainted with his art and gave it a proper chance instead of just saying, this is too weird, I don't like it. And Lynch just seemed like such a kind-hearted, well-intentioned man, and that's on full display in this film as well. One of my favorite things about David Lynch was his ability to see the beauty in things that other people labeled as ugly, and I believe The Elephant Man proves how vital that mentality is. The world needs more people who are genuinely kind and will give someone a chance when no one else will, and the world needs more people like David Lynch who can look at something others dismiss as flawed or gross or scary and see it as something special and worth celebrating.